Both long and short-term rentals are in high demand. So there is a great appeal with that to purchase a property to rent out because there's some good money that can be made. And some people like the idea of maybe using the property some themselves and renting it out some, so you get the best of both worlds. But keep in mind that just because you own a property doesn't mean you can do whatever you want with it. So in this video, I want to share with you 5 pitfalls with investment properties, things you need to be mindful of before you take the plunge and purchase that home or condo. Hi, I'm Jill Thomas, and each week I bring new videos about what it's like to live here in the Sunshine State, and then of course touch on real estate here in the Sarasota Bradenton area. So if you've been thinking about making a move or moving away, this might be a good channel for you. So if you wouldn't mind, please hit the subscribe button, the notification bell, and keep on watching. But most importantly, when you're ready to take that step, or if you just need to chat some more before you take that step, then please reach out to me, call, text, email me. I'm here to help you out as you navigate these waters. I could not imagine what it would be like to fall in love with a property, think it's going to be the perfect fit for you, close on it, and then weeks or months later realize you really can't do with it what you were hoping or planning to do. So in this video, here's the 5 pitfalls with investment properties. The first pitfall is not knowing the rental restrictions for a property. It's funny, a lot of people don't realize this, but every single property out there, condo, villa, townhouse, single family home, big house, little house, duplex, it does not matter. There are going to be rental restrictions. And with those rental restrictions, there's 2 main components. The first one is the minimum amount of time a property can be rented for. Now, this short period of time could be 2 days, 3 days, a week, a month, 3 months, 6 months, or even a year. So this rule is saying this is the shortest amount of time that lease can be written for. What's the absolute shortest amount of time a tenant can be in this property? Now, it can always be longer. So let's say it's a 1 week minimum. Well, of course, somebody can rent it for 10 days. It doesn't have to be like in week-long increments. It could be 10 days, it could be 2 weeks, it could be a month. If the rental restrictions are 3-month minimum, somebody can rent it for 4 months or 5 months. But there's a shorter, what's the absolute shortest bit of time somebody can rent it for. Then the second component is how frequently in the calendar year it can be rented for. So 1 week minimum, typically it's 52 times out of the year, but it could be shorter. 1 month minimum, maybe it's 12 times a year, but it could be only 3 times a year. So that means that you could only have a tenant in that property no more than 3 separate times in a calendar year. So that's really important. So number 1, minimum amount of time. Second one is how many times in the calendar year. Now, every so often properties will have another rule that will be, what is the minimum? After you close on a property, there is a time frame that has to pass before you can rent it out. So it might say, okay, new owners, you have to wait a year before you can rent it out, or 2 years. And they do that to minimize investors coming in and just scooping up places just to rent out. So they want to kind of cut that down a bit. So the number 1 rule or pitfall you need to avoid is not knowing the rental restrictions on a property. That is huge. Okay, the second pitfall is not knowing who dictates what those rental restrictions are. So you say, okay, Jill, that's great. There's rental restrictions on all of these properties, but who decides what those are? Well, good question. I'm glad you asked. So first of all, easiest one is condominiums or villas, because the condo association will dictate that, and it'll be written down in the condominium documents. There's condo rules and regulations, things like that. And in the state of Florida, there is a law, Florida statute, that says that the seller is required to provide to the buyers a set of the condominium documents that would include that information for you to review prior to closing. Sometimes we can get our fingers on those documents before we write the offer, sometimes after, but usually getting those rental restrictions clarified is pretty easy prior to writing the offer. So this first one is the condo association. The second one would be an HOA, homeowners association, similar to a condo association, but there is no Florida law that says a seller is required to provide HOA docs to a buyer. Now, we can always ask for some. There's ways to try to get them. So it's not an impossible task, but it's just not a law that protects the buyer. And then the third way, or the third entity, I guess is a good way to say it, that will dictate rental restrictions is the county or the city or township. So even in Sarasota County, not all of Sarasota County has a Sarasota mailing address, but for the section that does, part of it is in city limits, part of it is not. The section that's in city limits has a 1 week minimum restriction, but if you're in the county, it's only a month. So if you're really looking for short-term rentals, you want a Sarasota mailing address, then you need to be in city limits. Now, people know that, and as a result, sometimes that will garner a higher price on that property because of that, and also because it's closer to downtown. There's other benefits to being in the city as well. But the HOA or condo association would override the county or the city. So you could be in the city and be in a condominium that says, 6-month minimum rental. So don't assume that just because you're in the city, it's going to be a 1 week minimum regardless of the property. The HOA or the condo association will override that. So that's who's going to decide what your rental restrictions are, and that's where we need to go to confirm those things. So that's really important. Don't fall into that the pitfall of not knowing where to go to confirm what the rental restrictions are. The third pitfall is not knowing the rules in regards to renting and filing for homestead. In the state of Florida, you can file for homestead exemption. I was showing properties to a woman from Connecticut. They don't have something like this where you have tax benefits for claiming that the property is your primary residence. So in the state of Florida, we do have that. But if you rent out the property at all, if it's to somebody else throughout the year, then you can become ineligible for that homestead exemption. Even if it's your primary residence, you could live here 9 months out of the year. But if you rent it out at all and you get busted, you can lose that homestead, and you might even have other fines and fees you're gonna have to pay. So make sure that you double check the rules in regards to homestead exemption if you're gonna live in the house, if you wanna claim it as your primary residence. The fourth pitfall is not knowing that different times of the year are gonna command different rates and rentability with that investment property. So maybe you've come down here during season, during our winter months, for a couple weeks or a couple months, and you think, well, man, if I get a similar property like that, I can rent it out for this much money. Or maybe you've had friends or family come down and you hear about how much they're paying to rent a place during season. So you think, sweet, I'm gonna buy myself a similar house, a similar condo, and what's been paid during February and March, I can multiply that by 52 or by 12 or whatever the number of times you can rent it out during the year, and I'm gonna make some really good money. Well, here's the thing. You get top dollar during season, during January, February, March, April. But the rest of the year, you're not going to get as much money for the property. Or if you rent it out annually, you're not going to get as much per month than what you do during our peak season. So don't assume you're going to get that kind of crazy good money all year long. The rest of the year, you can get good money, but not crazy good money. And then also the demand is a lot higher during season to get that thing rented out. So if the property has a minimum of 1 month rental or 2 month rental, you're not necessarily going to book it out the rest of the year, May through December. There's going to probably be some gaps in there. So just keep that in mind, that the rentability and the rental rates are going to change throughout the year. Okay, pitfall number 5, sort of a catch-all with a lot of things. We're going to talk about taxes, mortgages, rental agents, and a couple other little things. First, please be aware that in the state of Florida, if a property is rented out for less than 6 months, it's going to be subject to what we call a tourist tax. And that's part of the reason why we don't have state income taxes, because all of our tourists are major taxed on everything. So there's something called tourist tax. Now, that usually gets taxed to, the tenant pays for that, not you as the owner or the landlord. But be mindful of that if you're not aware of that and you're trying to rent something out on your own and you go to file taxes and you make them aware of that income, you're going to be on the hook for that tourist tax since you didn't charge it to the tenant. Something else I want you to be mindful of is if you're getting a mortgage, even a conventional loan, and you're buying a condominium that allows really short-term rentals, it might be difficult to impossible for you to get a mortgage with a conventional loan. You may need to talk to a lender about something called a non-conforming loan, because what happens is when you get a loan and you're purchasing a condominium, the association or the management company fills out something called a condo questionnaire, and there's specific questions that the lender is looking for. And if the association, the way everything's run, doesn't fall in certain buckets, then you can't get the loan. So you're either paying cash or getting a non-conforming loan. So keep that in mind if you're looking at really short-term condos. It might be hard to get a mortgage. Something else that people always ask me about or they're looking into is they want to be able to purchase a property with a loan, and then they're hoping that by renting it out, they're going to be able to cover the mortgage, the property taxes, the association dues, maybe even insurance, depending on the property. Sometimes, like a condo, the insurance usually isn't too bad, but with a single family home, it can be. So they're hoping that by renting it out and using it as an investment property, they're going to be able to cover everything. That usually doesn't happen with our short-term condominiums. And like I said before, sometimes it can be hard to get a loan anyhow, but our association dues for some of these condominium complexes are so high because of where they're located. A lot of our short-term condos are on Siesta Key, so it's not unusual for monthly dues to be $800, $1,000, $1,500 even a month. So to be able to offset everything isn't going to probably happen. If you're paying cash, yes, probably you can cover all those expenses by renting it out, but not if you get a loan as well. So keep that in mind. Now, when it comes to renting out, most places will allow anybody to act as the rental agent. Maybe you want to do it yourself with Airbnb or VRBO or something like that. Have an outside rental agent, a licensed agent. A lot of places, if they do have short-term rentals, they'll have an on-site rental management company. So you need to find out, are you required to use that on-site rental agent? Can you use somebody outside? Can you do it yourself? And sometimes there's benefits to using the on-site company. So ask about that, confirm. Most of the time you can do it however you want, but just double check that and compare and contrast expenses and costs from using somebody outside or doing it yourself compared to having somebody on site taking care of everything. And then my final little tip or pitfall here. I know that in the county, in Sarasota County, where you're not in the city limits and it's 1 month minimum rental, there are people out there who are renting out their property short term on Airbnb or VRBO. And neighbors are getting pretty upset. They're getting pretty ticked off, to be honest with you, because when these tenants come in and they're here to have a good time and enjoy Florida and have a lot of fun and stay up late, well, all the neighbors are, they might be fun neighbors, but they need their sleep too. They need to go to work. They've got little kids, things like that. And so when people are breaking the rules and purchasing a property and using it as a short-term rental, neighbors are turning them in. So be mindful of that. If I sell something to somebody and later on they use it as a short-term rental, I make them aware of these rules and everything up front. If they do it on their own, so be it. But people are getting pretty fed up now because it's becoming more and more common, and they're being turned in pretty quick with that. So just keep that in mind too, that, you might be able to get away with it, but then maybe not. Neighbors are getting pretty upset. I hear it quite often from a lot of people. So that's number 5 pitfall, bunch of things right there with mortgages, taxes, and all that kind of good stuff. So there were my top 5 pitfalls with buying an investment property. They're not really pitfalls. You just need to be aware of these things and then work around them. And sometimes people will call me up with these great ideas of so many things that they have in mind, and they've got it all worked out. Sometimes they'll have spreadsheets going, and then when I start to share some of these things with them, they're plans start to wither and it all goes out the window. So I'd rather have you know these things up front now, be aware of it so you can work around it. It's not impossible to have a great investment property here in the Sarasota area, but you just need to know what the rules are, what you can get away with, what your limitations are, and then go forward that way. Now, of course, if there's something you want to talk about, give me a call, reach out to me, shoot me an email, we'll schedule a time to chat. We can do a Zoom call, whatever you'd like. I'm here to help you out. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I appreciate it. Have a great day.